Ramaswamy campaigns with infamous former Representative Steve King. Do you remember Steve King? Or have you forgotten? Oh, mind you. Des Moines, Iowa, Steve King, former Republican Iowa congressman with a history of racist and controversial statements, that's putting it mildly, reemerged on the political scene this week, campaigning with Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy Wednesday. I've been told it's Vivek, and I've been saying Vivek. Perhaps someone will let me know, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Although King has not endorsed Ramaswamy officially, he did express his intention to caucus for the Ohio businessmen, and support has been welcomed by Ramaswamy with open arms. King riding on Ramaswamy's campaign bus. The pair have campaigned together often, speaking in opposition to the use of eminent domain to build carbon capture pipelines in Iowa, a stump issue for Ramaswamy as he continues his barnstorming of the state. CBS News with the reporting here. King, who served in Congress for 18 years, lost the GOP primary for his district in 2020 after defending the terms white nationalism. Now is it coming back for you? And white supremacy, nothing wrong with it, in his view, in a 2019 interview with the New York Times. It drew widespread bipartisan condemnation. White nationalists, white supremacists, Western civilization. How did that language become offensive? King told the Times in the interview. Ramaswamy would go on to defend King during a presser. Okay, let's watch.
I did get to know him. And I have to say that my impression of Steve is that he's a good man, that he's somebody who deeply cares about this country, that he's somebody who has been misunderstood and misportrayed. And so I'm not going to take the media's narrative. I'm going to form my own judgment of the people who we ally ourselves with. And so far, my judgment is actually very different than the media's judgment, that this is a man who cares about this country.
Well, I guess he's a thought leader for some, and that should do it. Maybe not. Ramaswamy had previously talked about the great replacement theory during the GOP debate being real, an ideology that Steve King has pushed in the past when talking about white birth rates. Well, let's hear that.
To the German people and to any population of people that is a declining population that isn't willing to have enough babies to reproduce themselves. And I've said to them, you cannot rebuild your civilization with somebody else's babies. You've got to keep your birth rate up, and that you need to teach your children your values. And in doing so, then you can grow your population and you can strengthen your culture. You can strengthen your way of life. That's a clear message that we need to get our birth rates up.
I wish I hadn't eaten before sitting in the host chair today. It's about to come up. Hearing that, I've heard it before, but it's about to come up. Wish I hadn't eaten. In a prior interview, Ramaswamy would also defend offensive remarks made by Trump. Cue Abby Phillips.
Over the weekend, I just want to play this from what President Trump said to his supporters.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country. The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
That language, they live like vermin. Do you believe that that is, as your Republican colleague Chris Christie has said, neo-Nazi rhetoric?
This is a classic mainstream media move. Pick some individual phrase of Donald Trump, focus on literally that word without actually interrogating the substance of what's at issue.
The word was chosen for a reason.
We are in the middle of a cultural war in this country.
Well, you know what? It's
actually describing a series of behaviors. You have Antifa and other related groups that have been burning down cities for the last 3 years in this country.
Would you describe them as vermin?
Violating the rule of law. We have an invasion on our southern border. We have millions of people crossing our southern border. Let's talk about the substance of why we have to recognize that we're not in ordinary times.
Would you use that language yourself?
The vocabulary of the verb or not is not what's important. Well, I haven't used that language. So you can look at my track record on the campaign trail. I talk about the issues. We all talk about them differently. But what I'm not going to do is play some game of focusing on some word that somebody else said without ignoring entirely the substance of what we're actually talking about.
This is a very primitive formula, but he keeps using it. He keeps using it with mainstream media. Let me just dance around the issue. Oh, and breaking news, Antifa issuing a cease and desist. Keep our group name out of your mouth, perhaps. I don't know. But was the question ever answered? Not so sure about that. How about Van Jones? Alarmed by the rhetoric used in the GOP debate? This is how Ramaswamy responded at Turning Point USA, that event.
And then you get the mainstream media. You got this character, Van Jones, on CNN afterwards saying, this is the rise of an American demagogue who's going to live 50 years longer than Trump. This is dangerous. I am shaking. That's what he says. Just shut the up. At a certain point, just shut the up. Van Jones at CNN.
You know, Senator, this is another one that you're needed to unpack here because he's annoying. He is young with that, perfect white smile and just a nasty mouth and all the confidence in the world, as if he's wearing, 6-inch platform shoes. Okay. Got all the confidence in the world, but he's annoying. I, though, tend to focus on those around him, those supporting him, those tolerating him, those playing to him. Maybe that's wrong because maybe Van's right, Senator. You tell me that this is representative of a real threat here that might not win the nomination, but stay on the national stage. And for those of us who wish to dismiss and ignore, well, we did that before, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And look what it got us in 2016. No, Van Jones is absolutely right. Ramaswamy will be around, God willing, for a very long time. I think it was Dr. Maya Angelou who said, if somebody shows you who they are, believe them. He may be younger than Steve King, younger than Donald Trump, younger than some of these other extremists in the GOP, but he is very much the personification of a spirit that is not inclusive at all of people of other ethnicities and other races. He, the fact that he thinks what Steve King said was okay, the whole white supremacy. I mean, he is Donald J. Trump in some ways reincarnate, just a younger version of him. And the fact that he had the gall to call Van Jones a character and tell him to shut the F up. I mean, Don Lemon got fired for less.
Thank you.
How dare he tell Van Jones to shut the F up? How dare he? Who does he think he is? But again, he's cut from a cloth that does not believe that people should have agency, especially Black people. He uses the Black condition as examples of, he's against the diversity and inclusion and equity and says things like we shouldn't replace one form of discrimination with another. No, righting wrongs and making crooked paths straight in this country is not replacing one with the other. It is creating an environment where this country must atone for its sins, and it has not atoned for its sins. And it is people like him all over this country who have the mentality of him is one of the reasons why we can't have truth and reconciliation in this country. If anybody should shut the F up, it should be him.
Yeah, I would welcome that. I would welcome that about a year ago. And thank you for mentioning Don Lemon, who dared to do some reporting at the
challenge
desk
him.
and dared to just point out some things to the viewership. And
That's
Don
right.
Lemon was, I guess, viewed as radicalized instead of being someone who had a command of history.
That's right.
History, and simply ask the questions. But we want to be fair and play to a certain audience, I guess, until that person's pushed out. And then I guess we'll pivot again. Now, what am I talking about? But I hear you.
I would like him
to. I would like for him to have several seats.